What would you do if a lonely 87-year-old man rode into forbidden waters where no one dared to venture and, when intercepted, he simply raised his arm to reveal a tattoo that made the entire Coast Guard stand at attention, silent as if before a sacred rite? He carried no weapons, no papers, no explanation, only a gaze that had witnessed what the nation tried so hard to forget. So, what was that tattoo? And why was it powerful enough to move an entire fleet? The answer lies at the end of an oath kept hidden for 4 decades. All right, my dear audience, prepare for a story that will leave you speechless. Take a moment to hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see viewers joining us from around the world. Astoria is a town shrouded in mist year-round, where the Columbia River empties into the Pacific with a silent sigh. Wooden houses dot the gray sand slopes, their elderly occupants leaving no footprints on the wet beach. In a neglected corner of the seawall separated from the rest of town by a rusted wire fence and wind-bent pin stands a weathered silver-gray shack. No one here truly knows its owner's name, only that he is a quiet old man, deft of hand and eyes that carry the echoes of another era. His name is Samuel Brandt. That year he turned 87. Every winter morning he rose before dawn, stoked the kitchen fire, then sat before a block of dark red wood-like old blood, silently chiseling and carving as if in conversation with a distant spirit. He spoke little and befriended none. Only the steady sound of wood cutting each afternoon, the slow, mournful pulse of a forgotten song marked his presence. Locals called him the boat builder, though he never sold a single craft. The vessel he had spent 3 decades crafting, named Quiet Wind, rested quietly under a willow, cloaked in moss and spider silk. It had no engine, no GPS, no electronics. It was simply a hull oiled by linseed and time, its interior divided into exactly 8 compartments, 8, the number of men in the unit he once served. In 1981, Samuel had been a member of a SEAL Special Ops unit, the Silent Birds. They were assigned a top-secret mission to land in Maribel Bay, where an enemy strategic communications station lay hidden beneath tropical rainforest fog and drifting Cold War satellite debris. That mission was never acknowledged, not in official reports, not in defense records. It failed. The entire team vanished, all contact lost. No one returned except Samuel. No one knows how he survived. No one had the chance to ask. He never returned to base. Instead, in 1982, he simply disappeared. He renounced every benefit, every document, every trace of the man he had been. For over 40 years, he lived like a drifting shadow, a forgotten comma in a history book never published. Yet one thing he never forgot: the date. The 14th of November. That was the day the Silent Birds went in. Each year, at exactly 5 a.m. on that date, Samuel would push Quiet Wing into the sea without a word. He would row off alone. No one knew where he went, what he did, or when he returned. By evening he would be back, silently hauling the boat ashore, his hands dripping salt water and his eyes as if in conversation with those who had died. The only person ever to approach him was a boy named Lucas, the grocer's son. Lucas once found a scrap of wood carved with a bird's wing and gave it to Samuel. The old man said nothing, only patted the boy's head. Years later, when Lucas enlisted, he found another carved wing in his kit bag, gifted by the old man again. Some live their lives to be written into history. Samuel Brandt seemed to live only to guard the parts history tried to erase. And, as every year, that year he set out again on the 14th of November. But he did not return that evening. No one in town saw him that morning. The fog was thicker than ever, and Quiet Wing did not appear on any radar. The Coast Guard was alerted, though only as a formality. They did not expect to find anything. They did not know that this voyage was not a ritual but a signal, a call to those still alive, though their names had been struck from the record. When Samuel Brant raised his left arm that morning, no one aboard the patrol vessel immediately grasped what they were witnessing. It was simply a faded tattoo, its edges blurred by years and overlapping scars. But to Lieutenant Ramirez, who had served in Coronado, was no ordinary tattoo. It was a living map. A map not to a place but to the truth. The Iron Bird's wing was broken, its feathers marked by 3 red stripes, its tail curling like a radio wave. The bird's eye stared straight down at the wrist, where a series of nearly illegible characters were inked beneath the skin. It was something no one could forge, a tactical code etched only onto those chosen for a mission that might never be acknowledged. Each symbol formed part of a language never taught in books, a language passed by glance, by clipped words in the jungle, by blood on sand, and by oaths sworn in silence. Every stroke carried meaning, a coordinate, an extraction time, an untransmitted signal. Only those who had survived that blank space in history could read it as a map back to the past. Ramirez said nothing. He merely signaled his technicians to inspect the boat. Quiet Wing lay like a temporal shell weathered outside, yet still breathing the unfinished task within. In the hull, beneath discolored oilcloth, they discovered an aged leather box. When opened, a musty air spilled out, as though touching a cemetery of memories. Inside were handwritten letters, stained, ink-blotched pages, many torn mid-sentence, as if the writer had been overtaken by a sudden recollection. A thick, cracked-bound journal chronicled every step of the operation, every jammed frequency, every day of lost contact. And then they found ITAN analog radio transceiver, rectangular, military gray-green. Likely the only piece intact after 4 decades. Though its edges were corroded, its knobs still turned with firm precision. Its small amber display glowed, and when a technician tuned the dial, a strange signal crackled to life. A lone call, repeating like a mechanical heartbeat from the ocean's depths. Echo 9 waiting, Echo 9 waiting. They recorded it, checked its frequencies. No modern system used that band. It was not part of any rescue network nor current military grid. According to final Pentagon data, that frequency had only been used once, by the Silent Birds in 1981. Echo 9 was the code name of the unit Samuel had served. The unspoken question hung in the inspection room. If that team had been declared lost, who was sending this signal, and why had it persisted on that same date for 40 years? Ramirez offered no answer. He knew he had stumbled upon something beyond his authority and beyond comprehension. Samuel remained silent, seated by the hatch, his gaze never settling on anyone, but flicking to the peeling paint on the hull. Not that he lacked words, but that everything needing saying was inked on his skin, written in the leather box, and broadcast through that radio. The truth required no defense, it only needed someone patient enough to tune into its frequency. Quiet Wing was hoisted aboard the larger ship, carefully tarped like an archaeological relic. The leather box, radio, and journal were sealed, marked sensitivity level, red. Yet it was the unrecorded artifacts that moved hearts most, a tattoo no one could replicate, a signal that never ceased, and an old man who had spent half a century safeguarding them not for glory, but for a promise. And deep down, Ramirez understood, if an oath was the only remnant of a life erased from the record, then Samuel's gesture that day was not a plea for help. It was a reminder to the world, there remains one voice still waiting to be heard. When Samuel Brant was escorted down to the detention cell on the patrol ship, he said nothing, no protest, no accusatory glance. He merely walked slowly between the 2 sailors guiding him, as if every step on the steel deck was known to him. His damp shoes made a steady sound neither resentful nor hurried like the ticking of a wristwatch counting down something only he understood. The cell was small. A single iron cot, cold white walls, and a fluorescent bulb buzzing overhead. Samuel sat down without hesitation, leaning back against the wall, his hands folded in his lap as though awaiting something greater than confinement. Then he looked at his watch, an old mechanical timepiece, its face scratched and its leather strap worn, but its hands still moving, tick by tick. In a low voice, without looking at anyone, as if speaking only to himself, he said, "Just 3 more hours." 3 more hours. The words echoed through the lockup like an unintelligible chime, yet thickened the air like sea fog before a storm. None in the room understood what he referred to. An attack? A signal? Or something far more ominous? Lieutenant Ramirez, the only one whose eyes never left Samuel since the tattoo was revealed, stepped into the corridor and locked the door behind him. His footsteps faltered, then grew resolute. He felt he faced a puzzle beyond any academy protocol. He entered the command center, requesting access to the RedNet system and internal network for tactical-level classified files. When he entered the tattoo code, Silent Bird 9, the system paused for a few seconds, then displayed in red. Access restricted by Special Command Order 041181. An access ban dating to 1981, a record sealed permanently, retrievable only by direct Pacific Command authorization. Immediately, Ramirez sent an urgent report. The alert level was raised to amber-oozed for signs of anonymous military activity tied to unacknowledged operations. 37 minutes later, a response from Seattle confirmed senior officers were en route, ordering the patrol vessel to hold position and take no action against Samuel Brandt until they arrived. Meanwhile, Samuel remained seated, motionless. His eyes silently gazed toward a distant point no one aboard could see beyond steel, beyond ocean, beyond decades of decado, await something's return. His memories did not replay like clear film. They surfaced as fleeting flashes, a charred radio, frantic calls across a jammed frequency, the pale green flare lighting the jungle canopy, and a blood-caked hand gripping a radio handset. He remembered Collins's eyes, Collins, who stayed behind last. He heard the final hum of power through the transmitter, and then all fell silent. Echo 9 waiting. 42 years later, that echo still lived within him. 3 more hours. It was not a threat. It was a milestone, a moment he had waited nearly half a century to reach, not to reveal the truth, but to listen for those who might yet remember. On deck, the tension was palpably and silent. The chief technician checked the analog transmitter again, still sending the same call every 90 seconds. No one could explain why it remained active. The batteries had long since failed. No one could explain why the frequency still responded from somewhere out at sea. Ramirez peered through the cell's porthole. The old man sat neither panicked nor angry, but as if guarding something fragile and sacred, like a candle burning in his chest. And Ramirez realized this was not a suspect they held. It was the last soldier of a unit never meant to exist. A man who had lived half his life to keep a single moment 3 remaining hours for those who departed without a farewell. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or pour yourself a drink, then stay tuned for the rest of this astonishing story. Comment number 1, if you're still with us. 3 p.m. The sea off the Oregon coast lay unusually calm, as if the ocean itself held its breath. A thin mist curled around the patrol boat's rail, and sunlight filtered through heavy clouds in pale shafts, enough to reveal the horizon but not the faces aboard. Then, from afar, a steady sound began to drift in, deep and unhurried, like a drumbeat echoing from the ocean's depths. It was unlike any naval signal they had ever heard. The watch team snapped to attention, rushing to the periscopes and sonar stations, but what they saw froze every defense protocol in its tracks. An antiquated submarine hull, silver gray, rose quietly through the waves. No transponder lights, no flag, no warning. Faded on its side were the letters NR-37, the designation of an Ethan Allen-class sub decommissioned in 1984. No one could believe their eyes. A vessel erased from every operational record for over 40 years had surfaced like a ghost from history's abyss. On its deck appeared a lone figure, an elderly man in a faded naval uniform that matched the sub's weathered plating. He neither saluted nor bore arms. He merely stood there, eyes fixed on the patrol boat, as if he knew exactly who awaited him aboard. Samuel Brandt emerged from the brig without escort. Ramirez opened the cell door and said nothing. The entire ship seemed to posse no orders, no alarms, only that slow drumbeat echoing beneath the waves, a patient reminder that something very old had come home. Samuel climbed onto the patrol boat's deck. The sea breeze tousled his silver hair into the mist. He raised a hand to shield his eyes, never taking his gaze off the man atop the submarine. They looked at each other. No wave, no nod. Yet in that shared glance lay more meaning than any speech, the look of one who believed himself the sole survivor and the look of one who returned from death, needing no introduction. The man on the submarine Yonsei, Lieutenant Gerard Hawk Hawthorne, had been the Silent Bird's tactical commander. Records listed him Kia in 1981 alongside his team. Yet here he stood, alive, and like Samuel, he had chosen not to return until now. A gangway was lowered. No one ordered it, no one blocked it. Hawk stepped onto the patrol boat, his uniform damp with salt spray, his eyes still burning with the fire of a leader who had guided his men between life and death. He and Samuel faced each other, mere paces apart. Neither spoke. Then Samuel reached inside his coat and drew out a slender brass tube sealed with lead and copper wire. He placed it in Hawk's hand. Hawk accepted it, his hand trembling. He studied it in silence, then nodded once, as if a missing piece had finally fallen into place. The tube contained an unbroken radio coded the last order the Silent Birds received before all contact was severed. No one ever understood it. No one ever brought it back, until now. Every eye on the patrol boat turned to the two old men, standing like living monuments in a floating museum. No one spoke or moved, not out of duty but out of reverence. In that moment, every concept of right or wrong, life or death, mission or regulation dissolved. Only one truth remained. Some men choose silence to honor their oath, and some secrets cannot be buried so long as one person remembers. The wind gusted stronger. Hawk placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder, squeezing gently. No words passed between them, but in that gesture was a greeting, shared by men who had never truly parted. Their story needed no narration. They did not seek understanding, only a place where memory would never gather dust. And on that day, off the Oregon coast, two old silhouettes forced a modern warship to pause and listen to an ancient whisper. The unbroken drumbeat of unfading loyalty. No one knew where the leak came from. Perhaps a young technician moved by the tattoo his grandfather once described. Perhaps Lieutenant Ramirez's reverent gaze beside Samuel could not be contained. Or maybe, simply, some stories buried too long find their own way into the light. The first account appeared quietly on a veterans forum, accompanied by a blurry photo, the broken wing tattoo on an unnamed old man's wrinkled arm. That image spread faster than any official bulletin because anyone who had donned a uniform recognized it was no fantasy. It was real. An old war correspondent named Harold Keenahu reported on the Maribel incident in 1981, immediately set out for Astoria. He was one of the few living people to have seen the original communique called within 24 hours and replaced by a sterile, whitewashed version. When Harold saw Quiet Wing berthed under a weathered dock, covered by a faded tarp, he needed no further verification. For at the bow, carved deep into the wood, remained 3 vertical cuts, the mark the silent birds alone understood. 3 never returned. Within 2 days, hundreds of veterans converged on Astoria, unannounced. No banners, no parade. They simply came and formed lines along the pier where Samuel once launched his boat each year. Many wore patch-repaired uniforms. Some carried photographs of lost comrades. Some stood in silence, tears tracing unseen paths down their cheeks. No speeches were given, no ranks were mentioned. Just old soldiers bowing their heads before a man who never asked to be remembered. Samuel did not emerge from his shack. He did not step forward to accept accolades. To him, the crucial moment had passed the day he placed that coated tube in Hawk's hand. Everything since then was but an echo. Lieutenant Ramirez was the last to knock on Samuel's door on Tuesday morning. Samuel opened it, and Ramirez asked nothing. The radio transceiver, wrapped in oilcloth, along with the mildew-scented journal, was offered by Samuel with both hands. Not like evidence turned in, but like a father handing his child a piece of memory too precious to touch. Ramirez accepted in silence. Then he paused, eyes solemn. "I promise you one thing, these will reach their proper place, and no one may rewrite the truth." Samuel studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. The oilcloth was rewrapped carefully, bound with old rope just as a sailor of old would protect a talisman on a long voyage. Ramirez pressed it to his chest and walked away into the slanted afternoon light of Astoria's hills, where the sea still breathed softly below. 2 weeks later, in an unfilmed ceremony at the Navy SEAL Foundation in San Diego, the journal and transceiver were placed into a secure archive, not exhibited, not announced. They were kept as living proof of a chapter of history once forgotten. A sealed copy of the journal's contents was sent to the families of the 8 silent birds. Some had passed away, some had no next of kin. Yet the letters were delivered like a final whisper, returning names to those who never received a grave. Back in Astoria, Quiet Wing was mounted on a new wooden cradle. Locals and veterans built a simple shelter overhead, just as Samuel had done. No paint, no glassonly raw wood and rope. Beneath it, a small bronze plaque was affixed to the bow, inscribed with a single line. Not all who remain silent disappear. Some keep their oaths by never speaking. No one knows how long Samuel lived after that day, but from then on, he never sailed again. He did not need to, for his journey was no longer a solitary one. It had become something greater than himself, rippling outward like a wave, gentle yet unstoppable. Samuel Brant never returned to land. After everything, he chose to remain at Sean out of fear of the world, but because he had reclaimed a part of himself once buried beneath the cold sands in 1981. He and Hawk, 2 old men bearing the same tattoo, the same time-etched lines on their faces now, lived together aboard the little boat Samuel had preserved for over 40 years. Quiet Wing was no longer merely a vessel. It had become a sanctuary not only for their bodies, but for memories that the modern world was too hurried to perceive. They lived in silence, day after day, their exact location unknown. But each morning, while mist still clung to the water's surface, Hawk would turn the dial on the old radio transceiver, and Samuel would light the little kerosene stove. A signal would go out, brief, repeated. "We are still here." No one ever responded, nor did they expect a reply. For that message was not aimed at any single person, but at history itself, at the comrades lost, the erased memories, at soldiers who once wore the uniform yet whose names were never spoken. It was a silent affirmation that they had not vanished and could never truly be forgotten. On land, Lieutenant Ramirez left his naval career behind. Just 6 months after that incident, he resigned not from disillusionment, but because he had encountered something too vast to return to routine paperwork. Ramirez settled near Tillamook Head, the very maritime boundary once monitored by that patrol ship. He no longer wore a uniform, nor did he speak at memorial events. Yet every year on the 12th of June, the day Echo 9 first re-aired after 4 decades, he would climb to the old Tillamook lighthouse and light a single oil lamp. That lamp was not for passing ships. It was for oaths that never expired. He treated it as a private ritual. No witnesses, no photographs, no press. But coastal residents knew whenever that lone lamp glimmered through Tillamook's fog, it meant a soul was being remembered. No name, no headstone, yet a guiding light remained. Samuel and the Silent Bird's story spread not by media, not by film, but by word of mouth, whispered in veteran cafes, taught in military classrooms, penned in the closing lines of old soldiers' letters. No movie was ever made. No script could truthfully capture the weight of their enduring silence. Yet people began to speak of the silent birds as metaphor. A symbol not, strictly a unit, but a spirit, of soldiers who demanded no honor roll, only faith that their silence was the purest form of sacrifice. Children in Astoria grew up hearing tales of the whispering boat. Residents still maintain the crude wooden canopy, beneath which hangs a single copper wire that quivers even on still days. And when asked, "Is that boat real?" they offer no argument. They only smile and point to the sea, where nameless waves still lap the shore, like a call, like a breath that never ceases. And somewhere beyond the horizon, 2 old men still turn that radio dial each morning, not to wait for a reply but to ensure the world always has a small anchorage where memory will never drift away. Some stories need no gilding with fanfare. They live in silence, and through that silence they resonate longer than any applause. Samuel Brant and the Silent Birds never demanded to be remembered, they simply fulfilled their oaths, reminding us that sometimes the greatest courage lies in maintaining silence when the world chooses to forget. We all will face losses and the unspeakable. But so long as someone remembers, so long as a lamp remains lit, those memories are never lost. If this story touched you, leave a comment in honor of those who served and sacrificed in silence. Share this video with a friend, a father, a grandfather, anyone who carries in their heart a radio signal that no one else can hear. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss other profound stories like this. For it is often the quietest moments that remind us to live more authentically,